morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I've had the opportunity to come to an awful lot of these agroforestry symposiums, but this one that focuses on silvopasture is a personal interest of mine. So I'm very interested to see what will happen over the next day here. I'll just say I don't know of any other agricultural practice that offers more to producers and to the planet than does the purposeful integration of trees, forages, and forbs and livestock. Okay, it offers a lot, and I'll just say that you'll hear over the course of the next day or so how well done silvopastures are not only economically sustainable, but they offer us a real path. They offer us a real path mitigating climate change. I'll just say it. In today's program, you're going to hear from leading researchers and educators and farmers and land managers and entrepreneurs and conservationists and others who lead the world in the great thinking that we have around silvopastures and how to use their thinking to move that into the mainstream of agriculture. It'll be fun, I promise you. And as part of my duties this morning, I'm also here to introduce our plenary speaker, who is Dr. Ashley Conaway Anderson. Ashley's a research assistant professor here with our Center for Agroforestry at the University of Missouri. Now, what's neat about Ashley is she has a really interesting background, okay? Her academic background is she did her undergraduate work and master's at Washington State University in animal sciences, and then continued that work at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. That's the academic background about Ashley. But what she comes with is a lot of really unique experiences. She grew up on a small farm. She knows something about sheep. She knows something about producing grade A goat milk. She knows something about producing blueberries and a lot of other produce. She spent time working as a manager of a dairy farm. She spent time in the greenhouse industry. She spent 3 years in Africa with the Peace Corps working with agroforestry systems. So not only are you getting a great scholar, but you're getting a scholar who's got a lot of really deep experiences that can bring things. I'll just say that Ashley's going to lead this morning our plenary session, which I believe we have the title to, and if it's up, it may be different than what I have written here, but she's going to talk about long-term silvopasture research trials and some of the work that's here at the University of Missouri. And so with that introduction, let's put our hands together for Ashley Conaway Anderson.
Wow, thank you so much, Rob. That was very good. I don't think I've ever been introduced with so much fanfare before. So thank you so much. And really such an honor because in so many ways I am following in Rob's footsteps. You know, he was one of the first people when he was working with Dr. Jean Garrett here when the center first started to do actual silvopasture research. So in many ways, passing the torch. So thank you so much. I did modify the title for today's session just a little bit as I was reflecting on what I really wanted to say. And I've decided to start with the idea of silvopasture being a practice of patience, because today what we're going to see over the course of the next few hours and meeting with everybody is that silvopasture is in a really unique and interesting place compared to a lot of other academic and agricultural fields. And we're going to see an interesting blend of past and present and future come together as we try to understand not only how this practice works logistically and how we can make it work on our own land and in our own communities, but also how it's worked previously and what the potential there is for silvopasture to move forward and bring us into a different and prosperous kind of future. So when we think about agroforestry in general, I like to start off a lot of my talks and a lot of my classes just to get everybody on the same page about what agroforestry is and how silvopasture fits into it. So my next slide has the 5 commonly understood U.S. practices of agroforestry. We've got forest farming, we've got riparian buffers, we got windbreaks, and then going down the list, we start getting the alley cropping. And then I usually put silvopasture on the very bottom. And I do that, and I always give people the caveat that this is not a scientific classification in any sort. This is my own way of kind of organizing it. Oh, perfect. Awesome. And I've kind of done this to kind of demonstrate that I like to think of these agroforestry practices as some of the less complex ones, a little more straightforward. They're really kind of focusing on one or two things. And then we get to the silvopasture system, and we're talking about a more complex system. And that's really because we're incorporating 3 different components. We've got the forests, we've got trees, we've got forage, and then we have the animal component itself. Oh, this is gonna be tough. You know, at its core, silvopasture is a very straightforward equation, right? When we think about it, we're talking about the intentional integrated management of trees, forage, and livestock. But we all know here in this room that it is not that simple. So I want to start by taking us a little bit further back and thinking about where this process comes from. And I reflect every time I start my silvopasture course in the semester. In order to know where we're going, we need to know where we've been and acknowledge the history of silvopasture. Next slide, please. This is going to test my knowledge, how well I know my slide deck. As Hannah mentioned, we are working on land that has been inhabited for a very long time by the people who came before us. And they have been managing this land for millennia in a way that a lot of species have evolved and co-evolved with humans. And that includes trees, that includes animals, and that includes all types of flora and fauna, right? And so this is where I like to start with my students. This is where I like to start with us today as well. Knowing and acknowledging that the land that we stand on has been managed in a more clinical term, but almost cared for and stewarded by people long before us in specific ways. And kind of trying to learn that history is a really important place to start, I feel like. Next slide, please. So, and this goes just beyond North America too. It's important to remember that agroforestry in general, but also silvopasture, what we think of silvopasture today, is a globally indigenous land management food production system. And the iterations of silvopasture and agroforestry as well can be found all over the world when we look back through history. So this is a relief from 1310 to 1320 AD estimated of a practice called pannage, where it was a legal term that defined the ability of commoners, if you will, to be able to use land that was owned and managed by royalty to go in and at a specific time of year and graze their pigs and harvest all of the mast and fatten up their pigs in the fall. It was a thing and an actual legal terminology. Fire has been used on the landscape around the world to be able to manage the land and facilitate animal movement. That then those animals can be hunted and utilized for more than just food, but also shelter, clothing, medicine, etc. This goes, we see that here in North America, but also this is a painting from Australia, looking at Aboriginal people also using fire. Next slide, please. Again, so here in America, we've got many important scholars who have talked about the role of indigenous burning as a cultural practice and also as a land management tool to facilitate a mosaic of habitat patches that promote food security in a diverse and productive landscape. Highly recommend this volume. Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer and Dr. Frank Lake, excellent indigenous scholars on this topic, and really can provide a valuable perspective on the role of fire in managing the land and creating a space for grazing animals. Next slide, please. We see traditional systems in Europe as well. There's indigenous practices of silvopasture in Spain and Portugal. When we look at the Dehesas, the oldest known silvopasture that looks like the silvopasture that we know today, over 2,000 years, we have history of animals being grazed in these cork oak savannas that's still being done today. Next slide, please. This is an excerpt from a relief found in Egypt, describing how goats would be put into the grape fields after harvesting all of the vines to be able to strip down the grapevines and manage them. And then this is a picture of an olive grove, I believe in Greece, but many places in the Middle East that still utilize grazing animals to manage the forage beneath their trees. This is a long-standing system, right? Silvopasture, we can find it all across the world, and it goes way back. Next slide, please. Recently, a couple years ago, a student of mine worked on a comprehensive review looking at the sustainability of silvopasture systems. And we intentionally made it a global review, which was a huge task. And one of our key findings in this was that silvopasture is indeed rooted in a rich and long history of traditional and indigenous land management practices. And according to all of the available Western literature that we reviewed, those systems are in decline. And we really need to work on acknowledging these traditional systems and figuring out the interconnected issues about why they're declining and try to rectify that, because there is true sustainability that can be found in silvopasture. Next slide, please. So this kind of brings us to today and what we're here to talk about. We know that there is this long-standing history of how silvopasture and livestock integration can be done in a lot of different iterations. The question that I always get, okay, how do I do it? How do I do it? How do you, sitting in the audience today, living and working in the land that we are on now, in the context that we're in now, how do we do it, right? There's a blending that needs to happen and trying to recognize and bring forward these traditional practices, but be able to apply them in a way that makes sense today and that can actually take us forward. So that's what my lab is trying to focus on. And I'm one piece in a giant cog of work, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that our lab has been doing to try to answer some of these questions. But first, next slide, please. I want to just make note, these are not officially, statistically, any type of official graph, but sort of my own little, I think it's really demonstrative of the increasing interest in silvopasture. So this is the total number of publications by year, according to the Web of Science database, which is a pretty comprehensive database. And we can see in the last 20 years, there's been more research that's been done in silvopasture. So using the keyword silvopasture, we see in the last few years especially, a pretty dramatic increase in silvopasture publications. Next slide, please. Looking at the Google search trends, which is not a very robust analysis tool, I might add. So take this with a grain of salt. This abstract index of relative frequency of Google searches, we do see an increase, generally speaking. More people are searching the term silvopasture using in the Google search engine in the last, since it's from 2012 to 2024. We're seeing an increase in interest as well. And that interest, next slide, please, is primarily coming in North America. We see interest in European areas and some work in Indonesia as well, but primarily in what we would classify as developed countries, right? We're seeing an increase in interest among more conventional agricultural systems. Next slide, please. So we know for sure at this point, I feel like that's a pretty good indicator that what I'm seeing and experiencing can be seen also in data trends. There's a demand for increasing information. And the question is, can we meet that demand? Next, can you hit this slide? So I'm gonna go over kind of what we know. What do we know about silvopasture? In addition to just traditional land management, what do we know scientifically about it? Putting the science behind the practice. We know that there's soil characteristic benefits to silvopasture. Silvopasture can improve nutrient retention, improve water quality, biodiversity. We see benefits to the animals in those systems as well, from a welfare standpoint as well as a productivity standpoint. And we can also see at times increased economic efficiencies and increased revenue diversity. You diversify your revenue streams and increase your resiliency in that way. But when I present this information, I always feel like I have to say, it can, it could, because we don't see consistently across the board all of these benefits at the same time. And we don't really know why. Why do we see benefits in some situations, but not necessarily the same magnitude in others? Those are the questions that we're trying to answer. So next slide, please. I'll just kind of go over some previous work that's been done before me. This is a study done by master's student Maddie Ford up in Minnesota. And they measured the animal performance and forage performance of a silvopasture compared to a closed woodland and an open pasture. And they found that there was similar average daily gain among the cows. Average calf daily gain was greatest in the silvopasture. Overall, a pretty positive effect they observed, but they also observed that more research is really needed. Next slide, please. We have Dr. Joe Orifice at Cornell, or Yale, excuse me. Also doing some woodland silvopasture conversion research, looking at these 3 forest treatments of silvopasture, open pasture, and a woodlot. Again, generally, we see some trends toward positive results. We see understory species richness increase. We see some increase in soil bulk density in the silvopasture and the open pasture. And we see some variable impacts on species-specific treatments. Again, not like we're getting bits and pieces, right, of these potential benefits. Next slide, please. This is some work done by Dr. Uma Karki at Tuskegee University that she was able to really definitively show that the microclimate in a silvopasture system is more mild compared to open pasture. And those animals grazing in those silvopasture systems are going to experience less variability in body temperature throughout the day. And that's a pretty stark visual of the difference, right? So that really supports one of the key proposed advantages of silvopasture, that we're improving animal welfare and performance due to the changes in the microclimate. We make it a more comfortable space. Next slide, please. Excuse me. This is some work done by Giro and others, again, looking at that microclimate effect. The differences over the course of the day between the CL, which is just a regular crop livestock system, and the CLF, which is a crop livestock forest system. So these have trees in them. And we see throughout the course of the year, morning and afternoon light and, temperature, we see distinct differences in the forested systems versus the non-forested systems and the temperatures that those animals are experiencing. Less variability, less extreme exposure, and that really can lend itself to increased animal performance. Next slide, please. This is another paper from Martins and others in 2021 that looks at the effect of tree shade on cattle reproduction. We'll see that the trees from the forested system intercepted solar radiation by up to 26% and mitigated that environmental heat, which ended up having a measurable effect on more transferable embryos for those livestock, improved reproductive performance. The animals that were maintained under that natural shade produced 81% more viable oocytes than in the open full sun area. That's a pretty significant improvement, right? Next slide, please. This is where I kind of wrap it up though. So we're seeing bits and pieces of positive data. Why is this not like the be all the end all? Why are we not screaming this from the rafters? Why is this not being done? So this is where we're going to kind of get into this. This is from a review that looked at agroforestry practices, so not just silvopasture, across the world, and did a comprehensive review on whether there is a net positive, a net negative, or mixed effects of that practice. And what I want to point out here is that for agroforestry in general, there were really only 14 studies that included gray literature, so not just peer-reviewed studies. That generally the vibe is good, so to speak, like we're seeing positive results, But there's a lot of mixed pies on that graph across the world, right? We're not getting 100% positive net benefits across the board in the entire way. This is really where the questions come in. So what is making silvopasture successful in some instances and not others? Where are the differences? What are the levers we can pull to really make it work for the most people in the most places? And I think one of the key points here is there are only 14. So next slide. This kind of brings us back to my first point here of annual silvopasture publications. The trend is increasing, yes. But when you compare the search term silvopasture, we have a total of 387 publications on Web of Science, compared to if you use the search term cover crops, which is also really engaging in popular regenerative practice, right? In 2001, there were more papers for cover crops than there are at the peak year of silvopasture, 74. And a total number of cover crop papers of 8,030. Now you compare that to a search term that includes corn and soybeans, 17,786 total papers for a corn and soybean paper. That covers, again, this is not like scientifically rigorous. This is just a general search, but I think it kind of frames the idea that we are still way behind when it comes to the amount and abundance of data that's available to support and understand these traditional practices. Next slide, please. So what do we know for sure? This is why we're here today. Can you click again, Mel? I have a cool animation. We don't really know. We know enough to say we don't know everything. That's just kind of where research is at in this field. And so this is also one of the reasons today we set up our session to really be kind of in a community setup. We're incorporating farmer experiences. We're incorporating producer experiences and technician experiences instead of a bunch of lectures. I mean, I'm the only lecture you're going to hear today, which I'm sure you're all very happy about that. Most of our sessions include panels where we're bringing together groups of people to share their anecdotal experiences and really tap into some of that more traditional knowledge in tandem with some of our research that we have. So I'm going to try to zoom a little quickly through this now because I think we're getting close on time here. If you want to, I'll briefly kind of talk about one of the key projects that I have been working on. It's got several different components. This was a grant that I first received when I joined the center in 2020, and it has two components. We're really kind of focusing on woodland silvopasture systems, so using existing stands of forest to create a silvopasture, a grazing space, and really make that done in an ecologically sound way. But again, we know silvopasture can look like a lot of different things. So this has two specific aims. The first one, we wanted to do a survey of producers to figure out exactly what's going on. Who is doing what? Are people actually grazing their livestock in the woods? And if so, are they doing it in a way that is managed and could lend itself to become silvopasture? Or are they really taking it down a path that can lead to really some detrimental environmental effects? We don't really have good numbers on that because it's not well differentiated. The second part of this study is to look at an actual research site where we take baseline ecosystem metrics of an unmanaged forest and put some of these woodland silvopasture conversion techniques into practice and see what happens before livestock are even added to the system. Next slide. Some key findings for our survey. I'll kind of briefly touch on this. What we have found is that more people who are grazing their livestock who also have woods are also managing those woods simultaneously. We have a large number of people who rotate between pasture and woodland, who have self-identified that they do woodland grazing. And all of these practices here, the frequency of responses in our survey of also doing forest management practices. Logging, thinning, mechanical clearing, prescribed burning, chemical treatment. If you see on that far side, very few people who graze their livestock in the woods have identified that they do no woodland management. That's a huge positive. We're seeing people already considering managing both of these pieces together. So that's a really positive indication. Next slide, please. We also saw that a lot of people, even though they do manage their woods and graze livestock simultaneously, the majority of these respondents don't think that they're doing woodland silvopasture. Very few people identified that they are, and in the yes column. And there's a lot of people that are unsure about what they're doing. So this kind of demonstrates that we have education to make up. We have knowledge to spread about how to do silvopasture well and guide people towards a very intentional management of those woodland systems. But the base is there. We have potential. We also see that over half of respondents in Missouri are willing and interested to adopt woodland silvopasture and take that practice to the next level, which is really exciting. We saw a higher incidence of individuals that practice grazing in the woods than not practicing woodland grazing. So these are kind of validating the things that I'm seeing and experiencing myself, just anecdotally. People are interested in this practice and they're willing to do it, and the pieces are there. We just need to give them a little push and give them a little more information. Next slide. These are some results from the second part of the study where we're looking at the plant community response of our woodland site as we practice to move towards establishing a woodland silvopasture. Next slide. Strictly speaking, we wanted to observe the ecological metrics associated with woodland silvopasture before we even introduce livestock. Let's see what these changes are. Next slide, please. We have a site down at Wordak Farm. We have about 80 to 90 acres or so of oak hickory woodland that has had some previous silvopasture work done before by Dr. Dusty Walter. And we've sort of absorbed some of those spots and plots, excuse me, to create some large paddocks. And there's a long-term establishment goal here to set up a site that can be functional for a long time, that we can conduct several studies on and get a lot of information on. So this first set of years, we split these future paddocks into 3 treatments. We have a control treatment with no prescribed burn and no mid-story removal. We did a second treatment, which was simply mid-story removal of our plots. And then we overlaid the third treatment that had prescribed burn and mid-story removal together. Next slide, please. This is just a brief diagram of what our sites looked like. I won't spend too much time on it. Next slide. Before we did anything, Seth collected a lot of baseline data. So this is a pretty good indicator of what the site looked like before. And then we marked all the trees and conducted a timber sale. Next slide. Conducted the prescribed burn. We seeded half the plots to see what would come up naturally versus what would come up if we added some additional native forages. Next slide. And we're seeing some changes already. Now, these are not dramatic changes. Unlike our study, these are a little more subtle. These are results for the mean quadratic, or the quadratic mean diameter, essentially kind of showing how many big trees versus how many small trees are on the site. Strictly speaking, what we see is a shift in the right direction. So instead of the stand being comprised of many, many small diameter trees, our shift from our treatments, we're seeing fewer trees, but of larger diameter on average. So what that's going to do over time, hopefully, we're seeing shifts where we're going to see a more open canopy, a more open mid-story with large diameter trees that cast a lot of shade. Next slide, please. We also evaluated the understory dynamics. We saw changes already in the functional groups of these different species in the stand. There's an increase of raminoid cover with just removing the mid-story of the plots. Adding fire showed the greatest magnitude of change. We saw a 5.4% increase in forb cover, an almost 10% decrease in shrubs, and a 5% decrease in tree cover. And similar to the tree stand, what we're seeing is, even if it's not significant in this first year, we're moving in a direction. We're moving in a direction that matches what we're going for. Yes. Graminoid is a functional group of forage. It's a class of plant, so to speak. We're just looking at different types of plants, essentially. Next slide. We saw no major changes in the ecological integrity of the site in the short term. So ultimately, this is not bad news, right? We're not having a really negative, strong impact on the site. And ultimately, this particular value of C value is just an index of floristic quality, aka, is it a good biodiverse site or not? We're seeing on average that the disturbance tolerance is pretty high, which means it's an ideal site for doing this kind of work. Next slide, please. Ultimately, our key findings are that we're moving in the right direction. We didn't see a lot of success with seeding forage or even having meaningful growth of the latent seed bed. So we have some more long-term work that we're still doing. And we saw some shifts in composition that really indicate a positive shift towards a more herbaceous dominated community, a happy grazing space, in other words. And we did see that thinning and burning, we think again about those traditional practices, adding fire to the landscape, a really positive thing. And that's one thing that I try to emphasize with this particular work, that there's good fire. And in a lot of places in North America, we need it. Next slide, please. So this is the next step for this site. There's a commercial timber harvest that was completed. We're going to add some additional burns this coming, next month or so, hopefully. We're going to overseed again with a larger acreage to really try to get that forage base established. And we're going to continue referring back to baseline over time. What are these changes in the trees? What are the changes in the understory composition? And then hopefully we'll have a strong enough base that we can put livestock in and start seeing what the impacts are, not only on the community ecologically, but also how the livestock benefit. Next slide, please. So this is kind of where we start to wrap up. Obviously, my work is one small piece. We have a lot of other ongoing work by a number of fantastic colleagues, both here in the US and internationally. And I keep coming back to this question of, okay, how do we do it though? And I find that because we are in a space where demand for knowledge is high, but the amount of information available is limited, we really need to prepare ourselves to move forward together and meld traditional knowledge with scientific knowledge, right? Western scientific knowledge, peer-reviewed studies. There is value in all types of science, whether that's your observational work on your own piece of land or the work that I do in a lab, right? So next slide, please. I'm going to end with this call to action as we sit together today and talk about this, each coming from our own respective places of silvopasture practice. I firmly believe that if we're going to build resilient communities, those resilient communities require resilient foodways. And domesticated animals have a specific role in that. Abundant, healthy future, livestock are important. We have co-evolved with domestic livestock for over 10,000 years. A lot of other flora and fauna species have co-evolved with human management and caretaking. And silvopasture is really a positive way to do that. I really feel like, the future needs innovative and collaborative solutions to meet the upcoming crises we're facing. And I firmly believe that silvopasture as a practice, agroforestry at large, has the opportunity to stand as an example of how to move forward into a just future, into a holistic and productive and really abundant future with everybody in the community. We can utilize our ongoing lab work, our ongoing Western scientific research. We'll bring the science to the practice. We also bring everybody else, right? There's a place for everybody and all types of knowledge, and we're really going to have to all come together and pool in all of our understandings and knowledges together in order to really make this happen. So that's where I leave us today. I have a final question slide with my information. Let's have a good day today. Let's have some productive discussions. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. Couldn't get away that easily, though.
I'm happy to answer questions.
I was just wondering what kind of, you said native grasses that you were seeding after you cleared?
And I even just deleted the slide that has the full list of what we seeded. So we worked with a local company called Hamilton Native Outpost. They focus on stewarding and producing a lot of native seed. Amy Hamilton's a fantastic resource for that. And she helped us develop a specific mix that had a lot of mixes. I wanted to focus on a smaller mix, but it was about 23 different species. We had cool season, warm season grasses. We had annuals, we had perennials, we had forbs, like legumes. We had the whole shebang. Kind of pretty typical Missouri native seed mixes. Gamma grass, Indian bluegrass. Yeah, I
Ro-
can't remember them all though.
Broadcasts?
Yes, it was broadcast by hand. We had a fertilizer seeder. The plots themselves are 5th acre fixed plots, and we only seeded half of them. So it was a fairly discrete area, and I was able to use a hand seeder that you would fertilize your lawn with, and broadcast seeded. We feel like the success that we didn't see in the forage establishment was due to the lateness with which we seeded, due to logistical issues. You know how research goes. We were a little late in getting the burn organized, and the weather didn't really cooperate. And so we ended up seeding around March. It was pretty late. So the interesting thing is, though, we didn't see like latent growth this past year of what might have, if it needed an extra year. The disturbance from the timber sale, I think, kind of slowed that down. So yeah, I don't recommend that strategy. That was experience we learned. So
Do you need any volunteers for burns in the future?
yes.
Are you doing any soil biology monitoring, like from the forest through the whole thing?
Yes, we also took soil samples right before we seeded and burned. So we have pre-treatment soil samples. Of course, soil takes quite a bit of time to see any difference. So we're going to take another set of soil samples here in the following year. We don't really have data on that yet, but that is one thing that we're planning on monitoring.
Did you also do pre-harvest? Like in
Pre-
forest setting?
Yeah, it was before it was all baseline. We have baseline soil. We also have, in addition to having baseline for the entire spot, we have maintained control areas outside of the sample areas that we applied treatments to. So over time, we will still have spaces that can provide some of that baseline information over time.
We have a few questions from the online participants. And so I'm just going to bring one of those into the mix and then we can come back to our in-person questions. So this is from Matt Wilson for Dr. Conway Anderson. Was light a measured factor in the study? If so, how was that measured? Lots of questions about how to hit that target of 30 to 50% shade where forages grow well.
Yes, we did not measure light. You can measure light using by trying to measure like photosynthetically active radiation. We did not take any PAR measurements. As far as getting that target of basal area, I learned from the best, Dusty Walter. He taught me. We went out together and he showed me how to mark all of the trees to try to target that basal area of what we were looking for. And we still, I think we targeted around 35, 40. We ended up getting closer to about 60. So, and that's due to a lot of smaller stem trees that the logger just didn't take with him. And so we'll still need to go in and reduce that basal area even more to really get that savanna landscape that we're kind of trying to reach. It's tricky. I'm learning to be a forester. I have seen your hand pop up several times, so.
Since I'm facing a similar issue, I was curious why, if you do the forest harvest beforehand, they generally want to take the big nice trees and leave the little scrawny ones. And so that to me kind of is working a little in reverse. And I didn't know if that was an economic decision that you wanted to help pay for the whole project by harvesting, or how you came about that
Yeah.
decision.
And Dusty, if you've got any additional information, you can chime in as well. We worked with a forester, I believe. Dusty did most of the working. But I would encourage you, if this is also something you're doing, try to work with a forester or a logger that understands your goals, and you can help select trees that you want to keep, that he may, if you wanted to sell everything, there would be somebody that they would want to take it, but work with them to say, I want to keep this one because it has a purpose here long term. It is, yeah. And it is total, we're differentiating between keeping the higher quality trees and like getting rid of the lower quality ones versus the opposite where you want to, what did I just say? I totally lost my train of thought, you guys. I'm sorry. Point being, either way is valid. And I think that, you know, if you want to manage your woodlands for future high quality timber, that's a different strategy than just having trees and woodlands for shade and building up that ecosystem for that purpose. And there's room for all of that. It's just working with a team that can help you reach those goals and be able to identify them. Do you want to select and keep the trees that are higher quality? Or do you want to really target the lower quality trees and get money to help offset the cost? Both valid. Dusty, you have to add?
I'm very pleased to talk with anybody who would like to about forestry and how to make your management and your intentionality of this a little bit more successful. I can give you input from my perspective, and then you can take what you like and discard the rest, right? But I think it goes back to what Ashley talked about some in her presentation, and that is managed systems. We're talking about a managed system here. And so having as much information up front in your decision process can help you with your management. And I've got some input for you that I'm happy to talk more with you about that.
We're going to come to one more question online while we're moving around. And I think this is a good segue to forest management. The question is about what's done with the slash material. This is something that came up yesterday too, that when you have a lot of slash, maybe after a storm, I know, Ashley, you've dealt with this too. What do you do with that? And is there any possibility for experimenting with using some of that slash as forage
Oh,
at the right time?
interesting addition. Okay. So again, I'll add the caveat, Dusty, thank you so much. I am learning to be a forester through this particular project, and I have a ton of fabulous collaborators and advisors. Dusty Walter, we've got Joe Alley, we've got Hank Stelzer. Please definitely talk to them as well if you want additional information on the forestry side of things. Our particular project, that we have some very large slash piles. So we are working with heavy equipment company right now to get them pushed over and burned preemptively before we can do our prescribed burn. So being able to work with somebody to manage the slash pile is an important consideration. I believe you can have somebody take tops with them or chip and mulch as they go along. There's a couple different strategies to manage the slash. As far as forage, based on the starting composition of the stand, a lot of the slash is actually pretty substantially substantial diameter trees, not really grazable material. If you're talking about clearing out more of an understory, mid-story with a lot of shrubbery, that might have some potential to be grazable. But again, then you're talking about what animals are you working with? Are they going to be interested in eating that particular browse? Cattle aren't big browsers. You're going to have to train them to do that. Is it more beneficial to add goats to the site beforehand to kind of clear out that shrubbery in advance? So I don't think foraging on the slash piles is really likely, but there's always space depending on what you're working with to see how to utilize some of that vegetative material with the animals that you have. I hope that was a satisfying answer. There's still, again, big red question mark. We have so many questions, and I don't know if I have good answers.
Are you able to tease out the effect of the understory versus the overstory? By example, I mean, if you have a study that involves K31 fescue as your understory versus a diverse suite of native species as your understory, those effects may completely overpower whatever overstory you have.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, to a larger question, I guess, of really what do we know from the literature? With the mosaic of information of what we feel fairly confident about is pretty patchy. So what I can say confidently about the effects and interactions of forage with trees is pretty limited. I think what I can say is that, yes, there are potential interactions between the forage type in the system, the tree type in the system. We see differences in a water competition between different forage species and different tree species. A lot of that also is dependent on the site characteristics. So not just the species of plants and trees and animals, but also what is the soil like? What is the weather and microclimate like? How all of that factors in. There's so, what I took out on an earlier slide that I usually try to keep in, that simple equation ends up actually being really more of a spider web of potential interactions. And we really only know some key pieces that we can confidently say, which makes extrapolating to different situations very difficult. So that's why I always tend to err on this conservative side of confidently saying, yes, we know this, just because those studies and those situations end up being very discrete, and we just don't have the abundance of reiterative literature that can support strong conclusions. I will say those interactions matter, and trying to understand those is really a full career's worth of research. Thank you so much, everybody.